London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Bridge is falling down, my fair lady, or shall it be my fair prey? The air was crisp in the heart of Whitechapel as the echoing chime of distant church bells melded with a murmur of the night. A fog had settled over the cobblestone roads like a shroud, twirling around gas lamps that cast dim, wavering pools of light onto the darkened streets. Within this misty cloak, Abigail Hart, known as Abby to her friends, walked with purpose. Her eyes sparkled with youthful curiosity that was framed by her raven-colored hair, which she tucked neatly beneath a gray newsboy cap. Abby's breath formed clouds in front of her as she navigated through the dense fog. The dampness clung to her skin like an unwanted garment, and she could taste the soot-tainted mist on her tongue. She wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck and pressed on through the gloom. It was then that she stumbled upon it, a scene so grotesque that even the fog hesitated to touch it. Chilled to perfection in death's embrace lay a body splayed in an unnatural display, limbs arranged with a disturbing care, and symbols carved nearby pulsated with malignant intent. The slick cobblestones whispered secrets of horror as Abby's eyes traced the outline of cold flesh, marked by the Ripper's signature cruelty. As her trembling hand reached out to touch the body, a foolish attempt to assure herself it was not a nightmare, her vision twisted into terror. Screams swirled around her, ethereal and piercing against the backdrop of a shadowy figure looming in the past, its hand raised high with a knife gleaming in the gaslight. The melody found her then, an eerie tune floating through the air, a lullaby that had no business in such a monstrous place. It warped and distorted as it played, each note gnawing at Abby's sense of security until it was threadbare and tattered. She needed answers. Her pursuit led her to local residents who peered out from behind their curtains with eyes full of fear. "We don't speak of him," one old man whispered through cracked lips, a finger pressed urgently to his lips as though silence could protect him. "Evil that one, best left alone." Yet Abby's resolve only hardened with their whispered superstitions and quick glances into darkness. She knew these streets, had grown up listening to stories whispered by firelight. Now those tales gnawed at her from within. The postcard waited for Abby at her doorstep later that evening, a chilling greeting inked with Ripper-like inscriptions. She held it in trembling hands, recognition etching terror deep into her gaze. There was something personal in this macabre token. Its message was clear yet unspoken. Now alone in her flat, Abby couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes upon her. The melody from earlier seemed to seep through her walls, a haunting refrain that wouldn't let her be. As she clutched the sinister postcard close, shadows danced just beyond the reach of light, their shapes taunting her, with promises of terrors yet to come. Under the flickering candlelight, Abigail Hart's fingers trembled as they traced the faded ink on the brittle pages of her grandmother's diary. The flame cast grotesque shadows on the walls of her small, cluttered flat, mimicking the dance of phantoms in her mind. Her breath hitched, and a cold prickle slithered down her spine as she whispered the words that revealed a sinister lineage tied to Whitechapel's most nightmarish memories. "The Ripper's shadow lingers," she read aloud, "and in our blood it finds its host." With a sudden gasp, darkness consumed her as the lights sputtered and died. Abby sat frozen, her heartbeat thundering in her ears, each thump a morbid drumbeat heralding a descent into madness. She stumbled over to the window, seeking the comfort of moonlight, but found only an oppressive blanket of darkness smothering Whitechapel. Hours later, under the sickly yellow light of a library desk lamp, Abby's eyes darted between lines of ancient text. Dust particles danced like malevolent spirits across beams of light cast by high, arched windows. Old newspapers whispered secrets as she flipped through them with increasing urgency. Her head throbbed in time with her racing pulse. Each discovery, a hidden message in an old article, a cryptic note scribbled in a margin, coiled tighter around her mind, like a serpent squeezing its prey. The librarian had said there was nothing left to find, but behind a false panel in a forgotten corner of the archives, Abby's persistence peeled back the layers of time to reveal a hidden chamber. The air was thick with the stench of mold and something far more ancient. Symbols etched into stone seemed to pulse with an unseen heartbeat, each one promising knowledge and threatening damnation. "I wouldn't linger here if I were you," came a voice from behind. Abby spun around to find herself face to face with a historian whose eyes bore into hers with an unsettling intensity. "Some truths are better left buried," he said, his words laced with an ominous tone that made Abby question if he was guardian or gatekeeper of these forbidden mysteries. "What do you know?" she demanded, her voice revealing more fear than authority. "Enough to advise caution," he replied cryptically before disappearing into the labyrinthine stacks just as silently as he had arrived. Night had fallen when Abby returned to her flat. Paper covered every surface. Sketches of the symbols from the chamber were pinned haphazardly on walls, already peeling with age. She sank into her chair, drained from her research, a hollow shell haunted by what she had uncovered. As sleep's embrace eluded her, she felt it, a cold breath disturbing the hairs on the nape of her neck. She snapped her head around, but saw only shadows that refused to sit still. And yet, she knew deep in her marrow that something lingered there, watching, waiting. A terror without form but heavy with intention, at once part of Whitechapel's history and now inseparably part of hers. The melody from before beckoned at the edge of hearing, not quite real enough to grasp, but undeniably present. A siren song for those cursed to listen. Chapter 3. The Unseen Hand. The amulet lay heavy against Abby's chest, a silver oddity picked from the dusty vowels of Whitechapel's forgotten corners. It was old, the figures engraved upon it dancing in a macabre carousel of ancient symbols and signs. Its touch was a spider's creep, cold, unwelcome. Each night since its discovery, it whispered dreams into her sleep. Dreams where cobblestone streets flowed with rivers of a crimson past, and shadows grew teeth. During one such dream, Abby found herself at the seance she had arranged with reluctant hope. The medium, a woman with eyes that saw through time, called forth the spirits of the silent dead. But as the candle flames quivered and then perished like dying breaths, frost bit at the room's warmth. A different presence arrived, an intangible malice that lurked in life's unseen crevices. It seized the medium, her voice splintered into 1,000 whispers, each syllable a barbed hook aimed at Abby's soul. The darkness had found a voice, and it spoke directly to her fears. In the days that followed, Whitechapel seemed to mutate. Mirrors turned traitor, their reflections morphing into grotesque parodies that mimicked Abby's every move with sinister exaggeration. Shadows cast by nothing chased her down the streets, tugged at her coat, and vanished when she spun around. Her skin was a terrain of goosebumps. Each hair stood on end as if electric currents ran beneath her flesh. Everywhere she looked, something unseen returned her gaze. New murders dotted the city like malignant stars in an urban constellation. The newspapers called it the Ripper's Resurgence, a series of killings that emulated horrors long buried but not forgotten. Abby saw them all. They left patterns in their wake that burned behind her eyelids when she blinked. Each victim was an echo of the past, and within their stilled eyes lay a silent accusation directed squarely at Abby. It was in search of answers that she descended into catacombs beneath Whitechapel's skin, a labyrinthine network where history's whispered secrets echoed off cold stone walls. The catacombs breathed with Abby. They inhaled her fear and exhaled it back at her as taunting murmurs. She squeezed through constricting tunnels that promised to reveal truths yet only tightened around her like a constrictor's coil, relentless and smothering. When Abby emerged from that stone maw back into London's muted light, she brought something with her, a pervasive paranoia that clung to her shadow like a second skin. Eyes glanced over shoulder after shoulder. Every sound was footsteps following close behind. Every stranger harbored sinister intent. That night, ensconced within her flat, surrounded by tomes of unspeakable knowledge and arcane artifacts that seemed to leer from shelf corners, Abby felt it. Something colder than winter's kiss tracing along her spine. Her heart raced, yet stood still all at once as she realized she was not alone. The unseen hand had grasped more than just her fate. It wrapped around reality itself, squeezing until screams turned to silence and fear became formless, waiting just beyond sight for its moment to unfold into terror's embrace. The nursery tune warped in her head, ring-a-ring-o roses, pockets full of posies. But Abby's pockets were full of nothing but crumpled scraps of evidence, and her hands, trembling as leaves in a storm, were her only futile shield against the darkness that clouded her memories. Trust, once a dear friend, had turned its back on her, leaving her questioning the very images that haunted her every waking hour. Abby delved into her coat's deep pocket, fingers brushing against the cold metal of the amulet that should not have been there, yet always was. The hospital room she had woken in was a cage of sterile white and beeping machines. It smelled of disinfectant and whispered lies of safety. With each moment, the walls seemed to close in on her, but it was fear, not illness, that fueled her desperate escape. Every shadow etched along the corridors could morph into a leering face. Each step she took pulsated with pain that shot through her like electricity, but she dared not cry out. London's streets ballooned with dread as copycats emerged from the city's underbelly, brandishing terror like a flag. People's eyes were wild with suspicion, glancing from one to another as if a mere gaze could peel back the skin and reveal the monster underneath. Anxious mutterings and jagged gestures painted every public space with paranoia. Abby could hear the city's heartbeat in disarray, a symphony of chaos with no conductor. Then came the eclipse, as if night donned its darkest cloak to play hide-and-seek with fear itself. At the heart of this blackened world stood Abby, alone amongst murmuring phantoms that slid around her like serpents made from smoke. They whispered warnings laced with venom about the blood coursing through her veins, a lineage cursed with glimpses beyond the veil. As she stood there, enveloped by darkness that drank in every ray of light, the cold wind caressed her skin with icy fingers, weaving through her hair as though it possessed a life of its own. Shapes flitted on the edge of vision, guardians or demons, it was impossible to discern, leaving behind secrets as fleeting as their forms. When light finally reclaimed its throne, and London breathed a sigh of relief into deceptive calmness, Abby walked among them. Yet inside her chest beat a heart heavy with uncertainty. The small oddities, a shadow that lingered too long, clocks that ticked out of time, carved knots of doubt deep within her soul. And so she moved through a world that had tilted on its axis, a reality splintered by hysteria and visions intermingled until truth and delusion danced together inseparable. What had become of Abigail Hart in those lost eclipse hours? Whispers clung to street corners like cobwebs. Some spoke of madness, others spoke of awakening. But amidst them all lay an open ending, an invitation to peer into darkness and question if indeed all was concluded, or if some evils remained timelessly lurking in wait.
Ladies and gentlemen, shadows and specters, thank you ever so much for lending your ears, and perhaps a piece of your brave souls, to the chilling saga of the echoing dread. Your presence on this fog-laden journey through the eldritch corners of Whitechapel has been both an honor and a delight. If the sinister whispers of Abigail's adventure have danced like will-o'-the-wisps through the crypts of your imagination, if the echoes of a timeless evil have sent shivers cascading down your spine, I would be most humbled if you could seal our macabre pact with a gesture of support. Cast your likes as stones across the still waters of the internet, and subscribe as one would enter a secret society with both curiosity and trepidation. Remember, my intrepid audience, with each like and subscription you affirm that the tales we share are not just mere ghost stories, but lanterns in the dark, flickering against the encroaching night. Fear not to tread where shadows dwell, for together we are summoners of tales, weavers of nightmares, and chroniclers of that which lies just beyond the veil. Do keep an ear to the ground and an eye upon the shadows, for who knows when the echoing dread might whisper your name next. Until then, sleep tight, and never fear to dream a little darker. Good night, and watch for what lurks in the unseen.